Hello, you're very welcome to this presentation, Mental Health and Wellbeing in the Workplace. And my name is Rosemary Brannigan and I'm an Employee Assistance Officer with the Civil Service Employee Assistance Service. I'm here today to talk to you about mental health and wellbeing. The Civil Service Employee Assistance Service is seriously committed to promoting mental health. In 2014, we launched our information guide on mental health and wellbeing in the workplace, which you can access from our CSEAS website. Now, the objective of this presentation is to promote mental health and wellbeing, basically to get you talking and thinking about mental health. In this presentation, we'll look at ways for you to look after your own mental health, as well as ways to support others with mental health problems. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about mindfulness and building resilience. I'm going to talk about some of the more common mental health problems that you see out there, like depression and anxiety. I'm going to talk about healthy eating, diet and exercise and the importance that is to your mental health. We'll also look at the internal and external resources that are there to support you. So the presentation is divided into 8 sections, and as you can see there is their definitions. We've got some of the common mental health problems, which will be in section 2. We'll talk about minding your mental health, the individual's responsibility in section 3. And in section 4 will be on mindfulness and building resilience. Section 5 is about what to look out for in others. And section 6 will be what can you do as a line manager. And section 7 will be what can you do as a colleague. And finally, on section 8, I will talk to you about all the internal and external resources that are there to support you. We're going to move on now to section 1. So section 1 is going to be about definitions. And the definitions I'll be talking to you about will be what is mental health, what is mental ill health, and what is mental illness. Now, the World Health Organization defines mental health. And the World Health Organization are experts on mental health, and they define mental health as a state of well-being where each individual can realize his or her full potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively and contribute to their community. In our information guide on mental health and well-being, we call mental health the emotional resilience which enables to enjoy life and to cope with the challenges life brings. And as you can see, a lot of factors can impact on our mental health, and each one of us respond differently. Our mental health, like our physical health, the experience of it is unique to each individual. So here you have some indicators of good mental health. Now, if you have 100% in every one of these, you'll be doing very well. So take self-confidence here. Well, imagine you're preparing for an interview. You've done everything possible. You've done the best that you can, and you're going in 80% confident. You go into the interview, and all doesn't go as you thought it would. And you end up maybe 70% confident. And you come back out, later on you get the results, and now you're back up to 90%. It all went much better than you thought. So you can see here, especially with self-confidence, the health is fluctuating. So our mental health is always fluctuating from time to time. So mental ill health. We can all experience challenges or difficulties in our life that impact on our mental health. An example of these challenges might indeed be bereavement, financial worries, health concerns. Okay. But they can be temporary in nature and relative to the demands of a particular situation. They can lead to poor concentration, mood swings, and sleep disturbances. But they are temporary in nature. Okay? They do not necessarily lead to mental illness. But however, being mentally unhealthy can limit your potential and may lead to more serious problems. So we have an example here. This is the iceberg, as you can see. Okay. So the iceberg, if you were in a ship or on the sea, this would be very obvious to you. You would see the iceberg. But as you can see underneath, there's an awful lot more going on. So I'm going to give you a personal example of a situation that happened myself recently. My colleagues' experience of me would be that I'm quite chatty, I'm outgoing, and I would be quite consistent in my mood. So one particular Monday morning I came to work, and they would have experienced me as being withdrawn. I wasn't talking very much, and I seemed to be keeping myself to myself. So these are the things, they noticed a difference in me, a change in me. That was very obvious. But underneath, there was a whole other story going on. And sometimes our mental health can be like that. There's a whole other story going on. In my situation, what had happened to me is I'd spent the weekend in the accident emergency room of a Dublin hospital. The only thing I had to eat that weekend was a Yorkie bar from the vending machine. And that night, going home at 3 o'clock in the morning, I ended up finding that my car had been clamped and I had to pay €180 for it to be released. I had very little sleep and I had to go into work the next morning because I had some appointments. So that's an example of things that people don't see. So that is an example. I'm going to touch on this right through the presentation. So possible signs and symptoms of mental ill health. A lot of people think your mental health is from your head upwards, but mental health is much more than that. It can affect us physically, psychologically and emotionally and cognitively. And you can see, taking my own example here, we maybe had a change in sleep pattern with the physical aspect of it. There may and definitely was tiredness. And then psychological and emotional aspect. Well, definitely anger at the fact I had to pay €180. Isolation, I wasn't talking to my colleagues about it. And there may indeed have been a certain amount of anxiety about my family member and fear. And then the cognitive part of that, well, definitely poor concentration. Maybe difficulty absorbing new information because I was preoccupied and working below par. Now this is just an example of where maybe a situation of mental ill health where it can affect us physically, psychologically and cognitively. I will touch again on that example at the building resilience stage of the presentation. So now we're going on to talk to you about mental illness. And mental illness is a much more serious condition a person can find themselves in compared to mental ill health. A mental illness is defined as the experience of severe and distressing psychological symptoms to the extent that normal functioning is impaired. And an example they give here is anxiety, depressed mood, obsessional thinking, delusions and hallucinations. Now some form of medical help is needed for management and recovery from this. So now I'm going to move on to the next section of this presentation, and this is section 2. I'm going to be talking to you about some of the more common mental health problems. Now this list is by no means exhaustive. And the problems I'm going to talk to you about are depression, postnatal depression, seasonal affective disorder, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder and suicide ideation. So going on to talk about depression and understanding depression. 1 in 10 of us at some time in our lives will experience depression. It doesn't matter your age, your background or your gender. But it is possible to come through depression early. Early recognition and ongoing support is key. So depression, it's a mental health condition that affects our energy levels, it affects our thinking, it affects our feelings and it affects our behaviour. It can vary from being very, very mild to being very, very severe. And when I talk about mild, maybe affecting a person maybe for a week and their whole lifetime, to being very, very severe, where it has a serious impact on the person, their family and working life. And now again, it's possible to minimise the impact of depression by access to information and support and finding ways to manage the condition. Now we're going to move on to the symptoms of depression. And the symptoms are listed here in red. And depression has 8 main symptoms. And I'm going to talk you through the symptoms. We start with feelings. A person experiencing depression might feel sad, anxious or bored. The energy part, having low energy, feeling tired all the time, even after being fully rested. And with sleep, under or oversleeping, even maybe frequent waking. And with our thoughts, poor concentration. And another one is with our interest, maybe a loss of interest in things, a loss of interest in those things that we may have previously enjoyed, like meeting family or friends, or loss of interest in that hobby that we liked. Okay. Another thing is value, having a very poor sense of self-esteem, and having physical aches and pains where there's no physical basis. And the physical aches and pains can be chest pains, tummy pains, headaches, where there is no physical basis for, and also in certain circumstances, a loss of interest in living, think about death and suicidal thoughts. Now, if you're experiencing 5 of 8 of those symptoms all day, every day, for an ongoing period of time, what you may be experiencing is about a depression, and it is very important to seek medical advice or seek some support about this. Now, I'm going on to talk to you next about postnatal depression. And this is a type of depression that affects some women after having a baby. It affects, experts say that it affects 1 in 7 women. Okay? Now, the earlier postnatal depression is recognized, diagnosed, and treated, the quicker you will recover. Many of you've heard of the term baby blues. Well, it's so common now, it's considered normal for most mothers. And that usually happens 2 to 4 days after the baby is born. And it does pass, even though it's very distressing. But postnatal depression is much more serious. And postnatal depression happens, I don't know if I said it already, 4 to 6 months after a baby is born. And some of the symptoms of postnatal depression are listed here. Some of the is that feeling of being overwhelmed, being unable to cope, and also emotional outbursts. 1 minute maybe being angry, another minute being tearful, and not understanding why. And also finding it difficult to sleep even when the baby is sleeping.